the 18th of September 2025. I'm Dana. Oops. I'm Dana. Let me fix that. I don't know if I don't remember how to. Oh. Because I have... that's not it. There we go. Excuse me. 14 years after Japan. I'm Dana, by the way. And that number might not be around next week, but it looks of it. I'm too far in the hole to ever crawl out of that hole. After all the drama with my pension. And my website is down. We still got to struggle on, though, right? Still got to punch in the hard times. So this story, Martin Fackler, I got a video of him. 14 years after Japan's nuclear disaster, people with cancer are seeking answers. And James had put out a really video and song that helps explain that. That's about Fukushima, radioactive fallout, the story. But it's hard if you don't know much about it, right? So we're gonna play James Lucid's video that he recently put out, Overdiagnosis. And you'll understand it a bit more as I start to go through the first part of the show when you see how many cancers actually exist. It's not funny, it's horrifying. I'll be right back.
They said it's safe, they swore it's clean, but the testing showed what should not be seen. They call it something.
Over
so the overdiagnosis was in response to the story, but it was also because he's able to do a deep dive on what happened, right? Like most people can't. And so the amount of thyroid tumors in children was being described as overdiagnosis. In other words, stop doing it. And I'll show you that stuff. It was actually 356,000 out of a million when you scale it up from 38,200 was 13,646 with tumors of 2 centimeters, which their thyroid gland is only about 2 centimeters. The thyroid gland regulates the function of their bodies with hormones, right? So these are catastrophic. The numbers before that, and I'll play that stuff for you. The numbers pre-Fukushima were 1 in a million. When you see it, it'll make more sense to you, hopefully. I had to spend all day recovering from the last 3 shows because we were trying to do the double Dana, bring in Dana, the Mr. D as a co-host, and the amount of prep work that goes into it because you're learning, right? So it's a lot harder. So last night when my video's over, 52 views, but normally you would come in here, you see that blue, that's where you would look for the views, right? Just to keep a record, and I keep a record of everything. And you can see how low ball my numbers are, just incredibly low. And my quality's always gotten better, right? My information always gets better, never gets worse. I've been at this typically 5 days a week for a decade if I'm not out researching. And now it doesn't show up at all in the last couple of weeks, which coincided with YouTube announcing that they're using AI now on people's videos. And because I'm the only one in the nuclear industry, or I'm the most prolific in the nuclear industry, both pro and anti-nuclear, unfortunately. That tells you how much trouble we're actually in. So they're like, my comments won't show up for 12 hours. In the live stream, people used to always say, Dana, why are you blocking the comments? And I got nothing to do with it. I have nothing to do with it. But I'm going to challenge, and another interesting thing was because James is getting so good at his videos, like he's made 400 now, right? Songs, mostly songs with the videos. But he done this one, the Palace Days Premium Adjuster. It's about Holtec, which is, it's a very touchy subject because they're going to reactivate a brittle reactor, something that's already been bombarded with neutrons. And it's a really good video. He's only got 8 views in 22 hours. That's not an accident at all. "14 years after Japan's nuclear disaster, people with cancer still seek answers." Now, it's not just cancer. There's all kinds of other health issues. So just pointing fingers at cancer is pretty dishonest to begin with. So there was an extra 12,700 people died of heart attacks in just a single month in 2012. And as these statistics I start to go through tonight, you really get a better understanding of what a terrible excuse for a human, this creature, not person, because he doesn't have any human attributes. Martin Fackler. So I think this was at the ASAN Nuclear Forum. This is a big shot pro-nuclear forum. Now they're not going to come out typically in a mitt. Patrick Clausen had done. Just hang on, because my... What did I get done here? Oh. Better fix that. Because we had to change the studio in order to do the last 3 shows, and now I had to switch everything back. It's all good.
My name is Martin Fackler. I am the Tokyo Bureau Chief. And the title, as we just heard, was Challenges and Opportunities After the Fukushima Nuclear
So why is this video popping? There's zero possibility that should be popping.
Disaster, this crisis management. And the question of what do you tell your public? Do you tell them that there's a serious nuclear accident, or do you play it down? Do you try to cover it up?
Playing it down and covering it up is the same thing. And again, like the way they talk about the public as if we're some kind of disease or something. The electricity is for everybody, not just corporations. But it's like when they call you the public, that's an insult. They should never even be uttering those connotations. That shouldn't exist. We're already into the deep. We'll get there. Doesn't always work proper. Well, that video shouldn't have stalled, for starters. Not the equipment I'm using. So that was the same guy who wrote this article. That was 2013 or 2014. I just want you to see that he's been hating on humanity and the species to cover up the nuclear industry's crimes against humanity for a very long time. He clearly was at this long before Fukushima. The New York Times, I believe he said, bureau's chief in Tokyo. He's now up in Koriyama. The young woman from Fukushima has joined 6 other people with cancer. 6 people. And so the idea is to direct your attention to cancer and forget about all the heart and liver and lung and respiratory and pituitary and thyroid and adrenaline and Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndromes and everything else from radiation. Just look at a statistic for cancer, and then like 6 people after 4 reactors and 8 fuel pools melt down, statistically doesn't matter, right? But he's going to turn it into an argument as deception. That's what that's all about. He's doing. And we're here to call him on it. The young woman from Fukushima joined 6 other people with cancer in a lawsuit to seek compensation from TEPCO. The company says there's no scientifically proven link between the cancers and radioactive particles released by the nuclear meltdowns. So there was actually 865,000 cancers in the first year. Hence the reason we got a poll asking the question, which is extra. Do you think the extra 865,000 cancers in the first year was caused by Fukushima radioactive fallout? And if you don't, what else do you think it was caused by? I'd like to hear your opinion. Now, and I got a big Geiger counter up there in the corner. Let me fix that. It's a little big, Dana. Oh, looks like I screwed that up already. It's the wrong one. This one. I can make it a lot bigger if I wanted to. Let's make it that big tonight. We'll put it over here somewhere. It counts per minute. Yeah, that'll get him in my nerves, so these are there. That's real time. Let me make it a bit manageable, a bit smaller frame. And then if I make it a little bit bigger, it'll probably pop. Probably look a bit better. And you can see slightly tilted. I can actually filter that. I can fix that kind of in here. The only thing when I turn it on again, the more it'll move again for me, right? So we'll put it up there in the corner. 176 counts per minute of cesium, 137. I think this is what that's calibrated for. So 865,000 extra cancers. And a few weeks ago, the Fukushima Prefecture Screening Committee restated its conclusion of triple meltdown. Now, because they won't count reactor 4 as a meltdown, which had 9 reactor cores in the 2 fuel pools 100 feet above the stump you're looking at. They don't count that. So and neither does Martin Fackler, by the way. So right away, that's 2 major lies, right? When you start the story off with only acknowledging cancer, then he's focused on cancer. The company says there's no scientifically proven link between cancers and... But what else could be the catalyst for 865,000 cancers in just the first year? Not everybody got health care. Not everybody was diagnosed. A few weeks ago, the Fukushima Prefecture Screening Committee reinstated its conclusion that the triple meltdown, which is there's actually 4 I just showed you, they won't count reactors, and they don't count reactor 3, by the way. They call it a meltdown, but they don't actually acknowledge that it's completely gone. The fuel pools, because the most important facet of the story, unfortunately, is at the top of each of the buildings were 2 fuel pools with multiple decades of reactor cores stored in it. And we covered the Britannica Encyclopedia story last night, and we done the math on it. There's at least 6 reactor cores at the top of the buildings. But because they don't have a repository, they have them more densely packed. So you can assume there could be 10 or more at the top of each building. Like we go with 8. It matters because each of those reactor cores are 100 Cheronobyls, and you're talking about around 36 reactor cores. So it really does matter for long-term health effects. So this is an assertion that was put out there by the perpetually degenerate International Atomic Energy Agency, UN, in 2021 on the 10th year anniversary. They came out and said, for the news that day, for the anniversary, was all the media worldwide came out and said, United Nations finds no adverse health effects or expects any long-term health effects from Fukushima radiation. In 2023, for instance, when they went there and announced, in August 24th, announced that they were happy with the water being released into the ocean, they said this was a scam by the Asian countries, Taiwan, South Korea, China, Japan, and the International Atomic Energy Agency. I should have forgot my water. We'll get to stuff like this in a second here. Now we'll start rolling through this stuff. So it's 865,000. Anybody's keeping count, this is a great night to become a boy to do that. And many experts, including those at the international agencies, which are the same people on each of the committees, by the way, UNSCLEAR and ERPA and the IPRC and the IAEA, etc., they're all the same people, same different, right on the same, each committee, the same gray-haired 100 people, basically. All right, so there was a street there where 7 people dropped dead. 7 people in 2012. And remember, there was a massive spike in death by heart attacks. Let me come over here for 1 second. We'll get there. Do you think the extra 865,000 cancers could have been caused by reactors that have completely disappeared? Well, you'd be right if that's the way you're being honest and thinking that way. Martin Fackler, reporting from Koriyama, Japan, and every house in Koriyama City is entitled to be decommissioned. Or not decommissioned, that's not the right word, is decontaminated. I can't even remember the word. I got the tongue. I'm looking for something else at the same time. So let me find the other part of this equation first. We need Koriyama City, right? Okay. I'll get it. If it's the last thing I do in the next 2 minutes, I'll get it. Come on. There we go. All right. Koriyama City is an interesting story on its own. So this is a complicated story tonight. We're probably the only story we're going to cover tonight. All right. So this is a story about Koriyama City in 2013. Elementary school in Koriyama City, which is located in Fukushima, 34 miles west of the reactors. Now, just because Martin Fackler is using that as his so-called pseudonym for his web activities, that doesn't mean he actually lives in Koriyama City. He lives, as far as I know, he lives in Tokyo. You'll see reports coming out of Akuma and Futaba, which are right alongside of the reactors, but those reporters don't live there. An elementary school in Koriyama City located, and this tells you how sick these people actually are, located in Fukushima Prefecture, 34 miles west, is using water bottles like this. They have boxes inside, outside the classrooms, and they're stacking the boxes with water bottles to shield the students rather than moving them out. Is using water bottles to shield radiation coming from the courtyard and other areas because they think one dimension, which is a fatal mistake when we're talking about radiation. Radiation infiltrates everything. The bottles are filled with water and placed inside of square boxes that are stacked around the classroom. So rather than move the students out of the nuclear wasteland, now they're surrounded by millions of one-ton bags of radiation that was picked up. Is using water bottles. The bottles are filled with water placed inside of square boxes and around the classroom, inside and outside the classroom. According to the school, it reduced the radiation, it seems, by 1/3. First off, there's no way to stop the radiation from getting in the school because they have the windows open, the school doors open all day for kids coming and going. The ventilation system is just sucking radiation in from this. This is a nuclear wasteland, as you'll see coming up. I'll show you the evidence. The victims stuck in Koriyama City have been concerned about the high amount of radioactive fallout which have been found around their town. Koriyama City. So Koriyama City in 2012, UNSCLEAR, United Nations Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation, went in to do a cover-up, or sent somebody in to do it. They didn't go to it themselves, you can be sure of it. And so the numbers you see got highlighted: average disposition, radioactive fallout, density is the volume of cesium on the soil, not also in the soil or anything like that, or in the air, but just on the soil per square meter. And so the only time was cesium-137. And there's a ratio of 100 to 1 just to strontium-90. You just can't have cesium-137. It simply can't work that way. So the line over there, the next line, population and persons, and then the first line is the districts. That's the three lines I want you to really appreciate. 341,000 people, Koriyama City, with 162,000 counts per minute of cesium, of just gamma. Apparently there's no alphas, neutrons, or betas in the nuclear wasteland. It's the only place on the planet where that happened, I can assure you. Elementary school in Japan using water bottles to shield the students. That was Koriyama City. They have high amounts of radiation. And every house, it's like 94,000 houses and buildings there. Every one of them are entitled to be decontaminated, but they don't have enough homeless people to go around to do it. While school lunches are tested for radiation, parents are concerned because they are largely unable to find out where the items are originally produced. And we have endless headlines of Japan saying the students have to eat the rice. I can probably show them to you coming up. The government has barely conducted any decontamination activities. Remember, they picked up 30 million bags in the prefecture. And they picked up a hell of a lot more outside the prefecture, including Tokyo, and certainly Chiba. She was in middle school in 2011, so we're back to Martin Fackler reporting from Koriyama. I can guarantee you he does not live in Koriyama. Koriyama, as you just seen, was never decontaminated. They never picked up the topsoil, which still doesn't make it safe. Even if they scratched all the topsoil up, it's still not going to be safe. It's 34 miles away. On top of that, from ongoing nuclear meltdowns that might never stop. And that whole part of the country was covered in fallout of particles from the fuel. And those particles will be splitting atoms forever and ever. So it's always more the next day. Every day there's more radiation accumulated in the country, in your fields, in your gardens, and in the schoolyards and everything else. And females are 3 to 4 times more vulnerable than the males for some reason. And females are born with all their eggs. Males can reproduce tremendously, but females are born with all the eggs they're ever going to use. And so when you destroy the eggs of the females, you get rid of the population for sure. You're guaranteed. And this is what you see with all species, not just humans. Martin Fackler, 3 nuclear meltdowns. When 3 reactor meltdowns, now clearly he's not 3. And the meltdown is incredibly serious. Yeah, I was literally exhausted. I was exhausted yesterday, but I was literally exhausted today. I mean exhausted. Like just overwhelmed by it. So there's other journalists. Now, just because you call themselves journalists and they have a degree, that don't mean they're actually going to be doing journalism. These are here's 4, the big ones, right? ABC Australia, Cecilia Vega, CNN, BBC Rupert Winfield Hayes, United Kingdom, CBS United States, ABC is Australia. These are big medias, huge medias putting their. It's not just the so-called journalists; it's the mediums themselves that are allowing them and actually having them do this. So they're claiming they're 150 feet above the building to your left, but yet that building has never been counted in the inventories of material that was lost from the reactor cores and the fuel pools. And my goodness, at some point, see, the lie is too big. Even with AI coming out, the lie is still too big to hide. I see Jimmy Kimmel is gone. People are like, poor Jimmy Kimmel. He was making $16 million a year. He was a pig, too. Nobody will ever remember Jimmy Kimmel for being a good guy. They did do some public stunts to try to make him look like a good guy, but he didn't have that personality that I could tell. Not that I watched him very much, but the viral clips that I have watched of him was pretty nasty. He's a pretty nasty piece of work. 4 years later, a screening found a malignant tumor in her thyroids, a gland in the neck known to be vulnerable to the radioactive particles released. So this is a disgusting story. Martin Fackler. It's the same thing they've done after Chernobyl, where they only looked at thyroids, health issues, and everything else was buried, except for the academic study portion. We have the documentation. So there's 1 million becquerels. So a becquerel is when an atom pulses energy, an isotope pulses energy. And the best way to think of it is as an atom, right? And you can put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle. But cesium-137 will pulse energy every second in every direction for around 600 feet. So if you blanket your planet with stuff like that, the outcome is catastrophic to every species, because there's no species on this planet, including humans, that have an autoimmune trigger that can defend against the emissions from these isotopes. These are man-made isotopes. We call them that because they're harmful to everything, especially humans. And females are 4 times more vulnerable, particularly children. They're thousands of times more vulnerable than an adult because they got 20 years or so ahead of them of development, right? So they'll say, oh, it's 10 to 100 times. No, it's 1,000 to 10,000 times is more like it, as you'll see. After being decontaminated. So you can't decontaminate a highly contaminated place. And so if you've got 1 million atoms per kilogram, you got to multiply with 66.6 to get a square meter, like a playground. These are incredible numbers at 1 million. 185, not like the age of a turtle, 185 would be an evacuation zone at a nuclear plant pre-Fukushima. Now with 1 million of the children go to school. And for a child, you get irreversible heart damage, for instance, at 50 atoms a kilogram. For adults, it's permanent lesions to their organs also. It's going to be the same thing to the child. Because the child is closer to the ground, they're way more vulnerable again. And so when you got 1 million there per kilogram in the soil all around the school, imagine how contaminated the school actually is, and the door handles and the sinks and the water and that those communities has to be, right? Irreversible heart damage for children, 50 atoms a kilogram. By the way, that was the Japan Times. And so in the first year, not only did you have 865,000 extra cancers, you had 35.8% of 38,200 children with thyroid tumors of 2 centimeters. So an adult's thyroid is about 3 by 5 centimeters, and there's 2.5 centimeters to an inch. Wait, no, I forget some. Yeah, 2.5 centimeters an inch. And so 2 centimeters is about the size of the thyroid glands of a child. And because the children are very active with development, right? So their whole body, is constantly changing and morphing and growing and maturing and everything into an adult size. They're more vulnerable than conceivable because we don't have those attributes once you're an adult, even though you're still just incredibly vulnerable. So the child in a radioactive environment where you're breathing it, you're drinking it, you're sleeping on it, it's permeating in the air all the time. You can't shake it, you can't get away from it. You're exposed to it constantly. So you would expect to see these types of statistics. But in the first year, that's a frightening, as you can imagine, because this is lowballed overdiagnosis. Remember that song I played for you earlier? They stopped doing this. Because 2 centimeter thyroid tumor on a 2 centimeter thyroid is the size of your thyroid, which produces the hormones. So now all of your hormones are radioactive, anthropogenic radioactive hormones. Your body's not designed for that. And they're developing. Now you can't have these kinds of attributes, these kinds of radioactive numbers, say, because they were talking about cesium, which is a gamma, you're going to have equal numbers of betas, alphas, and neutrons. So you're going to have bone seekers. So the skeletons of the same victims are also producing radioactive stem cells, all of them. So their entire, and the same with the species, but they would have died off quite quickly because they reproduce quicker and they would have stopped reproducing, right? The vulnerable, the small species would have been wiped out fairly quick around these areas, these communities, that prefecture, for instance, and Japan as a whole for the most part. So 13,646 out of 38,200 is 358,000 out of 1 million. And before Fukushima, it was 1 in a
でまさに
million.
今そこに元気な人が死んでくんだよね。
But there's clear evidence rates have risen. Before the disaster in 2011, the rate of thyroid cancer was between 1 and 2 cases in every million children.
So it was 1 to 2 per million, and now in just 2012. Okay, let's keep her going. Hope somebody's keeping track of all this because this is important. So when you say child's risk of cancer from radiation 10 to 100 times higher than an adult who had the same exposure, that's not applicable to children in a nuclear wasteland. It's much worse. Infinitely worse. Like 6 out of 10 children have 6 out of 10 children have I'll have to find a headline here. I'll make it better. Higher than an adult who has the same exposure, because the child is going to be producing, because they're in a nuclear wasteland, they're producing so much. And I showed you that documentation from UN UNSCLEAR itself, right? Just a little while ago. So they're producing absurd amount, all radioactive stem cells and all radioactive hormones, and they're in a nuclear wasteland, and they're drinking it and consuming it and showering in it and cooking in it and doing their laundry in it. So everything's contaminated. And schools were taking children out of the Fukushima prefecture sometimes just so they can get a break from the radiation, instead of evacuating them, because the nuclear industry is just sadistic. It's sadistic to leave people there. And Martin Fackler knows this. Like, I played that video of him in 2013 or so. But when she got the diagnosis, the doctor told her immediately, fairmongered, that the growth was unrelated from the nuclear meltdowns. He calls it a disaster. So instead of being a journalist and explaining, right, or just checkmating him every step of the way like I'm doing, he just regurgitated the apologist's version under the guise of being a journalist. And this is what we see symmetrically throughout the medias. She wondered how the doctor could judge that without making further checks. Martin Fackler, man, is a spineless, soulless monster. That's a spineless person right there. You got to be a spineless to write stories like this. Is how he gets his paychecks. And so this was considered overdiagnosis, and that's, I would imagine that's the reason James, what he was thinking about when he was doing that song, because there's many facets to this story we've covered. And overdiagnosis was Geraldine Thomas and a few other of these apologists had used those terms over and over and over doing lectures and presentations, so it became quite popular. I mean, the story is insane. I would have to do the next entire month for another month of covering this topic to show you all the information we actually have. And pretending this is not happening is a fatal mistake to your loved ones and your friends and your families. So 13,646 out of 38,200, when it used to be 1 in a million. Okay, so there's 865,000 cancers. Children, you can't go anywhere in Japan and not get 50 atoms a kilogram. There's nowhere you can go. Here we go, get back on track. So the young woman now in her 20s asked that her name not be used because she had faced intense social pressure not to speak out. So why didn't he get somebody that could speak out? Because she could be fictional as far as we know, right? And he's only saying 6 people. So the average person, well, there's only 6 people got cancer, right? The average person is so complacent. They'll say, well, they probably got that from smoking and drinking tobacco because they've been fed that narrative their whole life. But there's more statistics. Congenital heart disease operations rose 14.2% in 2019 per 100,000 children, which is 14,200 children need open heart surgery for congenital heart disease, which leads to congenital malformations. And so this is corrective surgery so that they don't have a statistical increase. They will anyway, but so they can keep the statistical numbers down a bit by pretending this never happened. Because if you didn't have the surgery, it's like the 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. These are absurd numbers. 14.2% per 100,000 children across the entire country. So it's not isolated to Fukushima prefecture. back to Martin Fackler's story. Her question is one that has not been conclusively resolved 14 years. Well, we just resolved it, didn't we? Knocking out cooling systems at the plant leading to the explosion. And they want to put that, they always put that connotation there so people don't subconsciously think nuclear is dangerous. Oh, it was caused by the earthquake. Oh, it was caused by the tsunami. And it's, you'd be surprised what has happened that they've never told you about. And got away with it. I keep my brain fairly... leading to an explosion. That's very offensive, by the way. It's very offensive because they hid what happened to these buildings and they won't include them in their statistics. And so it seems to us, or not seems to us, that we're able to show over a long period of time now a consistency, symmetrically. The medias and the universities are not going to challenge the laws under any circumstances. It's never going to happen. And that means they are no longer useful. That means they have to have a time limit on when they need to be replaced. And we can't continue to allow them to be the source of information for planet Earth, because what they're doing is not social engineering, which is evil on its own. What they're doing is they're making sure you can't defend yourself and you can't help yourself. They're keeping you in the dark, allowing you to be poisoned, and they're making sure you don't understand that you were poisoned. They're working hard to do it. They go to school to get an education to get that job to do it. So suggesting that these buildings never melted down and the inventories were never lost. And if you look at the information, so number 4, they said if that happens, a doomsday-like radiation release if there was a fire in the pool was at the very top, 100 feet above that stump there, minimum. It would be a global catastrophe. The radioactive fallout would cover the entire planet, right? And bear with me. I'm getting quicker at this now. Okay, so let me just look at folly for, bring in some of that stuff. So you got more insight. The French discovered a spike. So this is not a projection. This is a spike of 1 million times normal pre-Fukushima numbers. I got my other screen just a half an inch too far away. I'm going to have to fix that. Because I keep got to do this to see over the screen in front of me. Because I got 3 screens here, right? I'm going to fix that right now because I can't take it anymore. I can't take it anymore. Here we go. That's a bit better. So 1 million to 10 million atoms is what they're talking about per cubic meter of air. So Becquerel is when an atom pulses energy. And the atom doesn't do it once, it'll do it hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of years, depending on the isotope. That model you're looking at, the radioactive fallout, is the west coast United States and Canada and Alaska. From Alaska at the top, say, down to Mexico. And so that was based on 8 days. This is the model based on, I think this one is based on 31 days. Yeah, based on 31 days. I'll tell you when we're at day 20. Day 18, day 19, day 20, right there. Of radioactive fallout of 1 million to 10 million times cesium-137 covering the entire planet. So how can you have 1 million to 10 million atoms in Canada, United States per square meter, but you can only have 150,000 in Koriyama? How does that work, I wonder? Showed this region north of Japan with radioactive particles. No, it showered the whole planet in less than 20 days, and all the studies from all the institutions and universities mimic that. They're all in consensus, and they all cover different isotopes. This particular one is cesium-137. Showed this region of northern, so like he's isolating to a very small area like Fukushima Prefecture. So the story is just pure propaganda. Martin Fackler, like if the universities had any integrity, they would take his degrees away immediately from him, because they can do that, right? But they're the ones who allow him to do it, and he knows it. A few weeks ago, the Fukushima Prefecture Screening Committee restated its conclusion that the triple meltdown, so you can't just have a triple meltdown. You can't, I'm sorry, you can't say just triple meltdown. Really, I got to go all the way back. Damn, hang on. It's confusing for me because I'm an honest person. I'm a good person. There's no reason to lie about this subject, and I run an educational program, and so if I'm making a mistake, the trolls will come out with the documentation and make me look stupid right away, right? If I'm telling the truth, they'll ignore me like I'm the plague. And the nuclear industry has more trolls, like real-life trolls. They live under bridges. They eat diapers. They're real-life disgusting parasites. So, according to Martin Fackler, and the rest of the journalists on the planet, this is what they'll come out and they'll sing this song where that didn't happen. They won't show you these pictures. Martin Fackler is not going to show you these pictures in his stories, right? He's using a fictitious person. There's no name, no face, when there's certainly lots of people out there would love to talk to him and tell their story. You have to be just the epitome of evil to do what he's doing. Okay, let's do a small recap here. So you got Martin Fackler, the New York Times, refusing to acknowledge all these people that have died. We have Martin Fackler, alleged journalist, saying, what do you do? Play it down, cover it up in 2013. Refusing to acknowledge reactor 4 melted down. Refusing to acknowledge there's 865,000 cancers in the first year. Refusing to acknowledge stories like 7 people dropping dead on the street in the first year. Or that the children are forced to use boxes of water to try to reduce the radiation because the nuclear industry and politicians and celebrities are cowards and leave them there to get sick and die when they can change the world. We have unclear acknowledging the radioactive fallout, but saying that it had no adverse effects whatsoever, which is impossible. Because if you get a single atom in your body attacks it for the rest of your life with white blood cells, eventually builds a tumor around it. You have a long documented of the radioactive fallout, yet they're saying it didn't happen. The damage is in tiny amounts, is incredible, and they refuse to acknowledge it. You have, if you do the scale up to 1 million people, it's 358,000 out of 1 million, when it used to be 1 in a million, to 2 in a million. They acknowledge the children are vulnerable, yet they refuse to acknowledge that there's any adverse side effects. You have congenital heart disease operations exploded to 14% of 100,000 children that need open heart surgery, congenital heart disease, and to stop congenital malformations from manifesting. That's 14,200 out of 100,000. These are absurd numbers. Like 100 would be statistically insane. 14,200 is just Unbelievable. And even back then, 2012, and this is what it looked like at the end of 2012, the first part of 2013. You have, and this was in May, but I mean, they were tearing it down to that point with remote control cranes. So it was very similar at this point, right? 2013, they were pretending they were on top of it. That if it happened, then it would be a global catastrophe. Well, it happened. And the amount of radiation fallout on the West Coast was extraordinary. That's just one example. That's just cesium-137. That's documented. That's a spike. And that the radioactive fallout covers the entire planet. So let's talk, like they're saying, 6 people got cancer at the entire population of Japan. That's what Martin Fackler is doing in his story, which I'm pretty sure is what motivated James to work like a devil, or I shouldn't say that word, but work like a dog, to post some kind of counter video to ask another question. Like, are you sure, Martin? Are you a piece of shit? And of course, James wouldn't say something like that, but that's where I'd roll in. Well, let's just talk about Japan. How bad was Japan? Let's just look at that. Let's look at some of the health issues that we know for sure. And then you can really appreciate what kind of low life these people actually are, because they're able to throw all of these victims, all these hundreds of thousands of children under the bus so they can get a big fat paycheck, wear a suit, and pretend that they're important. I don't think is acceptable under any circumstances. If it was any other kind of accident, they would be held accountable for it. But because it's nuclear, no one's allowed to go after them. I can't agree with that. Here we go. But you gotta, hang on here, we'll get some. Let's just go with these first. There's some serious health effects. I already showed you how absurd stuff. Another Fukushima cleanup worker dies just removing soil outside the plant, out one of the communities, and the nuclear wasteland drops dead. Fireman dies after working in Fukushima, vomited blood frequently. There was 300 police officers died of kidney failure that were guarding the communities to keep people out. 40% of Fukushima visitors showed internal exposures to radiation. Martin Fackler says, no. New York Times says no. Every university on the planet refused to acknowledge that this has happened. That is the most terrifying scenario imaginable. Over 1,000 nuclear workers have internal radiation, 10,000 counts per minute. I know what you're saying. Dana, they had paper suits on, Dana. You must be wrong. You got to be wrong, Dana. And allegedly there was 7,000 workers there every day. What are you going to do at a nuclear meltdown site with 7,000 people? When the one ahead of you drops dead, pick up the fuel rod and run. They allegedly had 260,000 people on ground zero, working right by the reactors and building ice wall around it. So 260,000 paper suits. How many paper suits did each person go through before? Like, it's simply not real. That was meant to give you the illusion that they were doing something. When they can't do nothing, it's a nuclear meltdown. Over 1,000 shown 10,000 counts per minute internal radiation. Like, when they go home and sleep alongside their wives, or the blankets they're going to sleep on become radioactive. The towels they're going to use become radioactive. The glasses, the forks, the utensils they're using, they're going to cross-contaminate because they actually got a hell of a lot more than that. They're only looking at gamma. After working in the affected areas, 4 workers died, victims of leukemia, heart attacks. These are the homeless and the destitute that they acknowledge, some of them. 5 Fukushima workers / homeless most likely received a fatal dose. They don't say nuclear academics, nuclear scientists. You'll never see a story like that. If you try to drag them there, they claw your eyes. They're like, where are they going? Please. Please don't make me go. I can hear them now. They pee themselves. They defecate. They reach down. They cover themselves with it to try to make you repulse, so you wouldn't drag them there. They'll claw the eyes out of your head. They'll literally, they will attack you. Even though they normally could never do that because they're cowards by nature, right? 5 workers, not nuclear scientists or academics or journalists, unfortunately. That's acceptable in my book. Worker died while decontaminating in Fukushima. Yeah, that happened, but according to them, it never happens. Extreme increase of mortality. The death rates might give the creeps to some people. Not Martin Fackler in the New York Times or ABC Australia or Cecilia Vega. Hang on, we get some more now for you. Send us people who don't mind dying. How about those headlines? You like those headlines? People are crazy. The nuclear industry is just... Yeah, just bear with me, we're almost there. There we go. So, New York Times, Martin Fackler, has made the assertion over and over, nobody died, nobody got sick, has been peering cover for Unit 3, and only 6 people in the entire population of Japan might have got cancer from Japan. So, I mean, that's just unconscionable. And he refused to acknowledge Reactor 4 had any kind of releases. 40% of Fukushima visitors show internal exposure. Japan government looking for kamikaze decontamination workers for the Fukushima prefecture. For the prefecture, there's more like it, yeah. Japanese medical experts deeply concerned about the children's radiation exposure. 51% of the kids are contaminated with cesium-137. High levels of gamma. But you can't just have gamma. You're going to be absurd amount of neutrons and betas and alphas. And 11 atoms a kilogram, you start to see heart problems. These are crazy small numbers. Because you can put, so a Becquerel is a pulse of energy from an atom, which is the isotope, right? Think of the atom as the isotope. And you put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, but you can't see it. But a single one in your body pulsing every second almost at the speed of light. There's nothing else on the planet that pulses energy at the speed of light, only man-made anthropogenic radiation. That with energy that can hurt you, right? And it does. It kills your chromosomes, your DNA, your cells every second with these explosions in every direction. Your body tries to repair every one of those destroyed chromosomes, DNA, and cells and everything else. Each second it can't keep up with it, and it's using white blood cells. And so it attacks the source every second with white blood cells because it explodes in every direction, destroying chromosomes, DNA, and cells and everything else. And irradiates your blood on top of that. And you're not just going to get one atom anymore because Fukushima happened. Original mystery black substance was never tested, much more radioactive than the official black dust. The detectors show 95,000 counts per minute and up to 60,000 counts per minute in beta, new alpha info. Mystery black substance had 1 million atoms a kilogram of cesium. You need an atom to make a Becquerel. Seen all over Minama Soma. Strong alpha emitters. So this is a very rare, according to the media and people like New York Times and Martin Fackler, it's very rare to find anything. And the reality of it is, it's horrifying what's happening, continues to happen. And they're growing food in these nuclear wastelands and shipping into Canada, the United States, and other countries. It's unconscionable what we're seeing, the amount of illnesses and diseases post-Fukushima worldwide, and in the species. Annihilation of all of our species worldwide post-Fukushima. How can we deny it? Fukushima Mom, 5 hospitals refused to provide medical care to the children. 5 hospitals said no. The doctor said it'll be confusing if our results is different from Fukushima Medical University. The Fukushima Medical University was a sadistic bunch of inbreeds, had conspired with the International Atomic Energy Agency, and they're in charge of diagnosis of whether you're going to be determined it's from Fukushima, is from Fukushima Medical University. And we covered that in some of our legacy headline shows. It's really disturbing what they've done post-Fukushima. How the International Atomic Energy Agency showed up and had their members working at those universities so that they can call themselves professors, but their job was there to direct the cover-up. Hospital president says people will be healthier after radiation exposure from triple meltdown. No arguments are allowed. So this is madness. That's madness. That would be a huge story pre-Fukushima, something like that. But post-Fukushima, that's the media and universities have now conspired and continue to conspire to keep you complacent and to ultimately harm you by withholding the information necessary for you to being able to make informed decisions. Irreversible heart damage for children. 1 million kilograms at a school after it's been so-called decontamination. German TV interview in Fukushima, more and more people living in highly contaminated places dying of heart diseases because of the cesium. It's not just cesium. The biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rod is the curium isotopes. And curium isotopes, you need lead shielding 20 times thicker. I think for 244, for instance, right? Now, I wasn't expecting to get much more than an hour in tonight. I'm going to keep going for a little bit. Get through a few more of these. Get through another couple of little buckets of this stuff. We do not serve any test for radiation exposure for treatment for the irradiation. So these legacy headlines are all the evidence you could ever hope for that this actually happened. This is documentation, and the pictures, of course. There's documentation that this actually happened. Top Japan official found hanging. Did not appear related to politics, no, after traveling to Fukushima, really. Up to 1 billion atoms a kilogram of iodine-131. There's 10 times more iodine-132 for every iodine-131, 30 times more iodine-133 for every iodine-131, 31 times more iodine-129 for every iodine-131, which has a 15 million year half-life, by the way. Estimated in seaweed near the Fukushima reactors. Even today, refuse to acknowledge they found anything there, despite the fact that we have an endless amount. High school teacher and a 16-year-old student died during sleep in the same night in Yokohama, which is, we know, is a nuclear wasteland. 250 kilometers from the Fukushima plant on top of that. Showed this region of northern Japan, showered this region of northern Japan with radioactive particles. He showered the whole planet, the entire planet, bar nothing. Let me explain a few other things then, while we're here. So let me get set up here. There we go, looking better. I mean, the numbers are pretty impressive of madness that actually happened. Here we go. So the tanks let's talk about the tanks for a minute, because that's kind of important. The tanks were built to manipulate people. September the 5th, 2013, TEPCO released a video of groundwater entering the crippled Fukushima Daiichi complex. The radiation levels around the tanks, this is the big tanks that you've heard a lot about, used to store the thousands of tons of radioactive water on site of Fukushima, have risen to 2,200 millisieverts, 2.2 sieverts per hour. This is per liter they're talking about. 20 feet underground was still found to contain 650 becquerels per liter. Oh, they're only talking about, that's only, like, see, because some signals, some, like isotopes, are more powerful than other isotopes. They'll drown out the other signal. So if you've got a liter with a lot of curium isotopes in it, that's going to drown out the signal of, like, see, tritium will get drowned out anyway, because everything is tritiated to start with. But all the other isotopes, they're a much stronger signal, will drown out on the Geiger counter the other isotopes, right? And so they do a mathematical equation because they can actually, they already know the ratios. So 2.2 sieverts per liter. You're talking about the tanks are millions of sieverts. So if you try to put that through hoses, you can never get near the hoses or pipes again. They're lethal doses forever. Even if you stop running the stuff through them, right? They'll be lethal forever. And I mean that. You won't get within 10, 12 feet of it without getting catastrophic doses right away. Your organs will start to melt after about 10 to 15, 20 minutes in proximity to these pipes and hoses. And so also in the so-called ALPS filtration facilities, the bigger problem again is it's all, if you look at the pictures that they released, it's all pipes, right? And filters. So now the filter is dealing with 2.2 sieverts per liter. So a gallon, if I take a gallon of it and put it in a McDonald's in the wall, every 20 minutes, everybody who walks in McDonald's will die. They might not die that day, but they'll die within a few days, or maybe within 20 minutes. If you put 5 gallons of this stuff in the wall, everybody that walks in the wall, hid away, in a jerry can, sealed, everybody that walks in there will die forever and ever and ever within 20 minutes. So imagine pouring this stuff into a filter. What happens? The filter, because like 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. Now you don't have to eat it or consume it or drink it or anything like that or wash yourself in it. You just got to be in proximity of it 10, 15 minutes. A short period of time. Say an hour. If you got 2 liters there, if you got 4 liters, for instance, of this stuff. Now they're only talking about gammas. You can't just have 2.2 sieverts of gamma. And this is one of the problems, because you're bringing up fuel particulates that are splitting atoms on top of that, are part of the fission fuel rods, right, where they had disintegrated. And if you put that into a tank, it's going to settle on the bottom. You're going to have uranium, plutonium. You're going to have gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas piling up on the floor, and you're going to get a criticality event. You're going to melt a hole through it, and it's all going to spill out. So it's pretty clear the tanks were empty anyway, because if you fill the tanks up with this kind of number, and that's what they were talking about, that's what you can't filter it, and you can't build another tank in proximity to it, and you can't fill it up because you can never drive past it again. It's like a sniper round. Even if the tanks were 6 feet thick lead, they still can't shield you. You're talking about millions and millions of sieverts. So the filters, if you change them every 10 minutes, you're still talking about thousands of sieverts in a filter. So there's no way you can survive that. You can't get back in the building on top of that. Once you if you did turn it on, now at 2.2 sieverts a liter, after say an hour, the 2.2 sieverts per liter are coming into the filter. When you leave the filter after an hour, they're like 22 sieverts instead of 2.2, because the filter is so incredibly radioactive. And if you took one of these filters and you ran it, say for, let's go crazy, say 24 hours of this stuff, and now you took water from the ocean or from a pond, fresh, clean water, and you passed it through that filter all day, forever and ever and ever, the water coming out the end, the other side of it will be more radioactive than the 2.2 sieverts. And so it can't be done. You can't filter these fuel particulates. You'll have a chain reaction in the filter. You'll have a chain reaction in tanks. You'll have a chain reaction, a criticality event in the pipes or the hoses because you have gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas, and you couldn't separate them. This was the story they put together because the typical person has no concept that this is a thing, right? In fact, most people don't even know Fukushima is still a thing, right? Yeah, well, 300,000 years, it'll still be a nightmare. Unfortunately, Tim. So 2.2 sieverts per liter. Okay, so let's look at that story for a little bit. Let's go a little bit better on that story. So they have many different systems that they tried to, like they had a Curry. They had a Curry system. They had the Siri with an S system. They had the Riva system. I'm going to show you that now in a minute. They had the ELP system. And these were all, they built a fence. They tried an ice wall instead of a real wall. It was 100%. The idea was to keep everybody off balanced and to make sure there was no descending voices, right, that was able to reach the population with a lucid diagnosis, for instance, right? Okay, I think that's, okay, that's the one I'm looking for there. There it is. So let me start off that picture right there. And then we're going to walk you through the other systems. There we go. So the Recurion system was supposed to separate cesium-137. The Siri system was supposed to separate cesium-137 because that's the lie they told you for 80 years, right? You rarely hear of other isotopes. So most of the population is familiar with cesium-137. So the cesium-137, the uranium, the plutoniums, the americium, the plutoniums, all are the exact same size isotopes. The atoms are all the exact same size. So it's impossible to filter them, particularly in this environment on top of that. Okay. When we counted the tanks, there's not 1,000 tanks, there's 750 if you count all the small ones. And we did. All right. The Riva system, which was the French government's system, and Riva was the French government at that time, right? Their system, 2014, in the late 2014 August, getting close to 2015, was abandoned. It was never used. Unused and kept out of operation. This story in April 2014, talking about the ELP system, has yet to function reliably. But the thing about that was that the ELP system in 2013, February, they were just starting to build it, and this was the handout pictures. That's the ELP system. In 2014, August, they had said that they were hoping by the end of the year / 2015, they would have a filtration system. Now remember, the tanks were spilling 2.2 sieverts per liter. And remember the International Atomic Energy Agency, when they talk about the soil, has acknowledged that they're not a regulatory agency and they're not in a position to judge or approve anything. So therefore, why don't they just keep their mouth shut? Because that would make everybody else on the planet a lot safer. Okay, back to the ELP system. So the ELP system was kept out. You're talking about 100,000 atoms per cubic centimeter. So normally the minimum measurements, we normally hear is liters. When they're measuring it in cubic centimeters, so this is the sludge they alleged, right? So they're dehydrating stuff. You weren't dehydrating anything on that site for the first number of years, I can tell you that much. July the 29th, 2014. The groundwater bypass operation not having effect. So they were hoping to catch water coming down the mountain behind the site and then redirect it directly into the ocean so it didn't flow through the site and wash more radiation out into the ocean, right? They said they were going to build a fence, like to keep the radiation from getting into the ocean, but radiation doesn't work that way. You got to have a bottom in the fence, first off. And it's absurd to suggest you could build a fence to keep nuclear meltdown emissions in. TEPCO's ice wall, which shouldn't exist, has no right to exist. Why wouldn't you build a real wall? Acknowledge that that didn't work. So the Fukushima wall, they allegedly hired 260,000 people. But what is 260,000 people going to do at a wall? So the idea was to give you this image of urgency that they were working furiously hard at. Like, they can't find enough people just to do the basic stuff. We're going to get 260,000 people to build an ice wall. And then if you divide the number of 260,000 into the total amount, you can look up on Wikipedia how much money they spent on the ice wall. Each worker got $1,140 if you didn't build a ice wall. But what would you do with all the paper suits from 260,000 people? Gloves and hats and boots and because this is the lie. They just tell lies for convenience. Well, let's tell them there's 260,000 people working on an ice wall, and we're going to get it done, and everything is going into the tanks, and where everything is being filtered. In reality, nothing was filtered. There was no diversions. There was no fence stopping the radiation. The ice wall, which should be a real wall, is still going to backfire on you because you're pouring water directly into the reactors all the time. And so see what they're showing you, this depiction of them working right around the nuclear plant, multiple nuclear meltdowns? No man's land? Like, the communities on both sides are no-go zones, but they're working right at the reactors, are they? Give you a head shake, man. When it falls off, give it a freaking kick. Korea called her handling confident, which is 100% perfect diagnosis. This could one day be considered the ultimate catastrophe. So the tanks were built in 2013 to lull us and everybody into complacency, to think that, nothing was getting into the ocean, because Chernobyl was 500 miles away plus from the ocean, right? There's other stuff that we got to talk about here. I'm just going to leave you with a picture of the reality of the story instead of Japan's version. So this video is just a couple of minutes. This is really important. And this is 2013. TEPCO is going to tell you in 2013 in this video, they have no control of water at the site whatsoever. And Rupert Winfield Hayes from the BBC, which is the reporter in 2013, who later claimed he was on top of the building and everything was perfect, by the way. But it's going to tell you all the tanks were full because of an aquifer underneath the building. Don't believe me? Don't blame me. Here's the evidence.
Fukushima plant sits smack in the middle of an underground aquifer. Deep beneath the ground, the site is rapidly being overwhelmed by water. Beneath the surface, water flows downhill and into the basement of the damaged reactor buildings. There it is contaminated with high levels of radiation. To stop the groundwater flowing on into the nearby ocean, engineers are building an underground barrier. But that is causing the groundwater level to rapidly rise. It's now so high the water will soon reach the surface. Then it will start flowing overground into the sea. This week, the company that owns Fukushima, TEPCO, made this disturbing admission.
We understand that this water discharge is beyond our control, and we do not think the current situation is good.
Outside experts say it's now clear TEPCO is incapable of handling the cleanup at Fukushima. It's time for the Japanese government to step in. The situation is already beyond what TEPCO can handle, he says. If it were possible to take proper measures, they would have done it already. It's not as if TEPCO is refusing to do what they can. They're doing everything they can, but there are no perfect solutions. Even if the government does step in, it's not clear what it can do. The only other solution is to pump out the contaminated groundwater and put it in storage tanks. But after just 2 years, the site is already jammed with more than 1,000 giant tanks. Most of them are already full up. At least 400 tons of new water pours into the site every day, and it's going to continue for years and years. Fukushima's water crisis has only just begun. Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, BBC News in Tokyo.
That's Rupert Wingfield-Hayes in Tokyo. Okay. 2013. All the tanks are full, and TEPCO on video is telling you they have no control over the water at the site whatsoever. Nothing. Bear with me. Yeah, I was so exhausted the entire day, right up until like a couple hours ago. I was like, wow, man, I'm drained. Well, we started on Saturday because last week was I was out doing some field studies. And I feel guilty when I don't get a certain number of videos out. And so Martin Fackler also refuses to acknowledge, you know, that 55 countries banned the food in 14 prefectures for over a decade. Martin Fackler, there's no way anybody got cancer from Fukushima. The scientists said so. Like they're growing food right alongside the nuclear meltdowns, for goodness sakes, in the nuclear wasteland, surrounded by 1-ton bags of radiation. You know, 865,000 cancers in the first year. Martin Fackler, no cancer. Dana's fear-mongering. Now that's Rupert Wingfield-Hayes up there, by the way, who just told you all the tanks were full in 2013.
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
And if, in terms of what we know about the capacity, about how many fuel rods would likely be inside that reactor, what sort of quantity are we talking about radioactivity?
I've heard different numbers ranging from 2 to 15 reactor cores worth. No, 2 to about 8 reactor cores worth.
So if it can't be controlled, that's worst case scenario, 8 reactors worth of radioactivity.
Right. Right.
And it would be released into the atmosphere.
By the way, the fact that this has happened at unit number 4 is understandable and is consistent with...
And it would all be released into the atmosphere. Let's do that again. Let me turn this up.
And if, in terms of what we know about the capacity, about how many fuel rods would likely be inside that reactor, what sort of quantity are we talking about radioactivity?
I've heard different numbers ranging from 2 to 15 reactor cores worth. No, 2 to about 8 reactor cores worth.
So if it can't be controlled, that's worst case scenario, 8 reactors worth of radioactivity.
Right.
And it would be released into the atmosphere.
Radioactivity. By the way, the fact that this has happened to unit number 4 is understandable and is consistent with the theory that it really did dry out, because the fuel from the unit number 4 was most recently discharged, and therefore was the hottest, and therefore the water would have boiled off more rapidly.
So if you go over to my videos and click on shorts, and you'll see his picture right there, that video, and this video. For sure. Well, that video there is that clip. And so we covered that last night. Do you think the extra 865,000 extra cancers, Tina, in the first year was caused by Fukushima radioactive fallout? Well, yeah. Duh, Tina. Okay, so I kind of made my point to help. So around 8 reactor cores at the top of each of the 4 buildings is the best way to... And now we covered that last night too, right? With the math. Let's go down and look at that one more time then. A bit slack here, Nate. So we covered Encyclopedia Britannica last night. Yeah, the volume. I had the volume off accidentally there, just in one of the transitions. So we lost maybe about 30 seconds or a minute. I jumped right into that video, fortunately, and then put the headphones on and realized I had forgot to turn the volume back on because I was clearing my throat while the video clip was playing. I didn't want you guys to hear it. Fact checked by Encyclopedia Britannica. The older spent fuel cooling pools are able to accommodate only about 10 years worth of spent fuel. Reactors in Japan were 845,000 pounds or something. And so they're taking out 1/3 of the reactor core every year, 1.4 years. And so if you look at that math, you're talking about 2.8 reactor cores in the fuel pool at a decade. But these pools are 4 decades old. And there's 2 of them. So you got to multiply by 2 just to get the first 10 years with 6 reactor cores in each of the fuel pool, or each of the buildings. So that's 36, 24 reactor cores in 4 buildings in 10 years. But these are 40-year-old, at that time they were 30-something years old, almost 40-year-old buildings. And so you can expect at least, let's bump it up to 8 reactor cores at the top of each building. There's a lot more than that because they're able to, they didn't build new poles, so it was packed more densely. The 1, 2, 3, 4 lines from the top. But loading, and we covered those stories about them changing the rules in Canada, changing the rules in the United States, so they can store more because they don't have a repository, right? Japan doesn't have one, nobody else does. So when you do the math, it still works out to 6 reactor cores almost in the first decade in each building. The common spent fuel pool has 6 reactor cores feeding it. So at the top of each of the building are 2 fuel pools and a reactor core. So just because they took the reactor core out, allegedly, now they normally don't take the reactor core all out. They only take out 1/3. I don't know why they would have took out the whole reactor core. They weren't doing a massive upgrade. So as far as I know, there was at least 2/3 left in the reactor core of reactor 4. And that would explain why reactor 4 is disappeared, like the pictures showed you earlier, right? Additional storage can be gained by loading spent fuel in pools more densely. And because the equation is only based on 10 years, the first decade. So these reactors were, over 3 decades, heading to 4 decades. So you can assume instead of 6 reactor cores at the top of the buildings, which was considered before it be packed more densely, there was at least 8 reactor cores, 4 in each pool. And right, Frank von Hippel, he suggested it could have been up to 16 accidentally or on purposely accidentally. Now, that video was from March the 16th, day 5. And so there was a whole lot of uncertainty at that moment. And so there was, and as we showed you tonight, a lot of these headlines, these legacy headlines of the first couple of years, we're very fortunate to have them because they tighten that ship up, right? The UN now runs the show and the narrative. And so we work very hard to be able to tell you this narrative, right? It's very mind-numbing to cover this constantly, but we dress it up with a whole bunch of local, recent nuclear news cycles to keep the momentum going. And that's a brutal routine too. People don't realize how hard it takes, how much energy it actually takes. And focus, you got to focus, you got to be dedicated. You have to focus to create the show every night. And you got to sit there for an hour and a half, 2 hours to tell the show every night, 5 days a week, in desperation to help protect your friends and families, loved ones who might even hate you. You still got to try to protect them, because deep down you probably like them. And by proxy, you protect yourself and all the beautiful species. Unfortunately, we're 80 years behind the 8 ball, and that ship has sank. And we can thank people like Martin Fackler and the New York Times, right, for selling us short and now dooming us because of. I mean, when you look at this is Sellafield, United Kingdom, nuclear reprocessing site, but that's not what you're looking at, is it? You're looking at all the farmland, right? This is a satellite picture. If you do the same thing for almost every single nuclear power plant and reprocessing site on the planet, you're going to see the same picture. Do you think that's an accident? And that the fuel pools, with the decades of reactor cores that we already talked about, are still splitting atoms. Each reactor core is still splitting atoms for millions of homes and businesses, but has no containment. Where do you think a lot of that's going to end up right away? It's in the food, right? This is real, what they're doing to you. You're like, well, Dana's telling the story, so I'm not gonna act on the story because Dana's telling the story. Because Dana's not on TV or whatever it is, blows your skirt up. You're making a mistake. Like, I'm the good guy, unfortunately, for some people, because I'm not going away. And I'm still very passionate and still very angry for what they've done to you on this planet and the future of this planet, and I have every right to be, and so do you. In fact, you're obligated, your obligation under not just the Bill of Rights or Magna Cartas or constitutions, but as an entity on this planet. Like you can't imagine how beautiful this planet was before the nuclear industry. The species was incredible everywhere you looked. It was an absolute joy. And yes, mosquito existed, but there was a lot of predators to keep them in check. Frogs and trout and everything else are dependent upon them, right? We got 46 million birds are missing. All the gray whales are emaciated. They're poisoning you from every direction. All the fuel pools at 1,000 fuel pools worldwide are doing this every day. And the radiation doesn't just land there. The plume covers the whole planet, wherever it's coming from, within 20 days, and it never stops coming from those places. It's assimilated in everything and every species in the biota and the biosphere, and eventually the clocks of all the species will stop ticking. They'll stop reproducing, and we are now looking at all the gray whales, for instance, are emaciated. All the kids in the United Kingdom got plutonium in their teeth from Sellafield. That's Sellafield right there. But 46 million migratory birds are missing where I'm to. They're not missing, they're dead. They died because the food chain is broken. They starved to death. The same as all the whales we're seeing are emaciated. And I was going to do a die-off show tonight. I just didn't have the heart for it. They're very difficult shows for me because we've done 6 years of research, 4 to 5 months on the ocean. So to me, it's much more real, I think, than the average person. It's personal, right? And it should be. In order to have integrity, you need to experience that hopelessness of seeing coastline strip and knowing the difference as a commercial diver to really understand that we're in real trouble and we don't have an option. We can't back down, we can't give up, and we can't go away. We can't pretend. We can't continue to pretend. And we don't pretend at this place. Nobody comes here all the time as a pretender, I can tell you that much. We're here because we were meant to be here. All of us, I'm pretty sure. James put out an extra video, bless his short one, was bless his heart. And we're going to close it down with that. Don't forget, you got a couple of minutes to give us a vote or a like. If you make it this far later, make sure you give me a like and refresh the page. Get your send it out to your friends and ask them just to like the video and just share the video. Nobody has to watch it. Just like it and share it so that we can try to beat the algorithms and sneak out there and have a conversation with humanity, because if they find us, the world could be a better place. We have that ability.
What these mofos up to? IAEA throwing medals for the game. AI running plans, telling crews how to ride. Hijack the op screens, buzzless, slow, no soul in the code, just a model in control. Southern brag loud, thermaline, it's tight, but the code hallucinate in the dead of night. New Euronets trained on the data set stale. Brittle log snap when the watchdogs fail. Decisions in the black box overload. Blue wave flex saying forecast clean. Bias drip heavy where the metrics lean. Constellation chant, megawatts safe, but the way still cake isotopes drip in place.
Halo rods ice, supply chain weak.
Selling safety on the balance sheet tweak. AI write the fate, data static thick while the errors calculate. IAEA clap, pioneers of chaos acting night holes in the trap. Talk fusion summits,
next year, next live.
but the plasma stall cold, investors stay high. Hold tick, terror press lines block the block. Waste steel slag where the cask stay locked.
Nothing in the code gonna seal that drum. Nothing in the script gonna undo what's done.
This the new hustle, automation on deck. AI in the core, cash money the check, but the byproducts take fallout, spread wide. Ain't no algorithm gonna hold that grind.
That was a song about whole tech. IAEA honors, you'll find a link below the video, Blue Wave AI Lab, Constellation Southern Nuclear, with 2025 Global Innovation Award for pioneering AI in nuclear power. And they say that AI could help the terrorists build a nuclear weapon now. I think the terrorists already got the nuclear weapon. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. We'll see you in the next one.